Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to this week's Michigan Game Day edition of the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. With us today is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. First, my view from Section 17 to get us rolling. I thought we would play well against Northern Illinois, but I didn't think we'd put that many points on the board. We threw the ball a bit more on Saturday, but I'm sure not enough for everyone's liking. I'm not worried about the passing game yet. If the offensive line continues to control the line of scrimmage and we can run the football, there will be open receivers for Cade to find. We just haven't needed to throw the ball yet, and I am fine with that. After 3 games, I would say we are seeing this team's identity. Control the line of scrimmage, run the football, play smash mouth. And that's not a bad identity either. The run game sets up the pass, and if we continue to chunk yards on the ground, receivers will be running around open. Now that Big Ten play is underway, though, and teams have more tape on us, they will start to load the box and make us throw. When that happens, we'll find out where our passing game is and if we need to be worried. Until then, I like what we're doing, and the best part is it seems our offensive players love being physical and doling out punishment to the opposition defenses. My guest today says Rutgers just might be the first team we've played that has the personnel to make us throw more. Joining us next is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive on this week's Game Day segment here on the Michigan Man, so stay with us. Here with us on our Michigan Game Day segment is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Once again, great to have you back with us, Aaron.
Mike, it's good to be back. Good to be back. Talk about winning football too.
Oh, absolutely. And as far as this season goes, Aaron, we've seen good starts during the Harbaugh era, I should say, and we've seen some shaky ones. But the way this team is playing right now, does it feel a little bit different to you?
Yeah, it does. You know, we had our reservations coming into the season about how things would shake out. I know many of us were, a little pessimistic about what would happen. And so far, so good. I mean, they're off to a 3-0 start. I mean, we can go down the numbers and everything else. They've really looked good offensively. I think the defense is kind of miles ahead of where I thought it would be through 3 games. Yeah, by and large, they're looking really good. We've said this before. I mean, they started 4-0 back in 2017, and the bottom fell out. But things do playing differently with this crew. I mean, they seem rejuvenated. The players, are smiling and happy, and it seems like they're feeding off the energy from the new coaching staff, something you didn't really get the vibe from last year. It almost seemed like things were wearing down for them. And they're winning does that to you. Obviously, 3-0 starting 3-0 helps. They're having fun and they're playing winning football. And I think at this point, this is really, I think, the best case scenario for the the start of the season.
I agree with that. And as well as the team has been playing and started, we still have Michigan fans clamoring for more passing. And we saw a few more throws on Saturday, but the fact remains, 3 weeks into the season, we didn't need the passing game again on Saturday, did we?
Yeah, you're right. No, I've heard that from fans. They were upset after the Washington game about Michigan not throwing enough, and it's really come down the first 3 weeks. Really, the game plan. Michigan wants to establish the run. It was something Jim Harbaugh and the coaching staff weren't shy about saying, before the season started. Offensive coordinator Josh Gaddis wanted to make that more of an emphasis with the offense. They know they have the playmakers to do so, as we've seen so far. And right now, the MO has been to run the football until a team can stop them. And so far, through the first 3 games, no one's really been able to do that. Now, that's not to say it won't happen in the future, because it surely will. But right now, Michigan's made an attempt to get it done on the ground early. They've had a lot of success doing it, so they're going to continue to do that. Do they need to throw the ball more? Yes. Will they have to down in the future? Absolutely. I'm of the opinion that you don't. If you're working on things, the passing game, and I think they lost a little bit of their downfield threat with Ronnie Bell when he was sidelined with an injury. You don't want to put too much on tape, especially when you're unsure of things or you're working things out. And I think you're going to start slowly seeing Michigan incorporate the passing game more. You saw that, I think, Saturday when they tried to get it going early. And I think you'll probably see it a little bit more on Saturday against Rutgers. But, if you're expecting this Michigan offense to go out there and air it out, in kind of a spread scheme that maybe some of us thought, Josh Gaddis was bringing in a couple years ago. Right now, that just doesn't seem to be the plan.
No, and after 3 games in a 12-game season, I think it's fair to say you have a pretty good idea what a team's direction or MO, personality, whatever you want to call it, is. Pretty plain to see that Jim Harbaugh wants this team to be physical and run the football down your throat, doesn't he?
Yeah, and it really kind of harkens back to his first few years here in Michigan. I mean, that's kind of what he wanted to do. He wanted to be that big physical football team that won, at the line of scrimmage and was able to run for 4 or 5 yards of play and do it on the ground. They kind of got away from that the last couple of years. They're trying to obviously throw the ball a little bit more and do some things differently and try to, quote unquote, modernize the offense. But it clearly wasn't working, especially, at the end of last year, as we saw. I mean, they had trouble moving the football and getting it down the field. And I think they recognized, too, where the strengths of their personnel. They brought back 4 starters along the offensive line this year. They have a playmaker in Blake Quorum who, he can obviously run the football, but he can get outside the numbers, too. And then you've got a back in Hassan Haskins who has that depth and that big bruiser mentality. So Michigan feels like it's strong running the football, and I think it's going to continue to do so, like I said, until someone stops them. But when you design the offense the way they have, they've clearly incorporated the run game more. You're going to see more and more of that. I think that's going to be the identity of this offense, for the 2021 season.
Right. And however fans feel, I know they want to see a little more passing. They want to see a little more wide open football. But football itself is a physical game. And regardless of what offense you run, it just doesn't matter. If you win the line of scrimmage, you can do whatever you want. And this Michigan offensive line so far has been very impressive, hasn't it?
Yeah, and by and large, I mean, they've stayed healthy. That was an issue last year. You had guys go down to injury. They're out for the year. They're constantly rotating guys in and out and shuffling positions. So you didn't really have that continuity that you wanted, to try and establish that ground game and have success, protecting the quarterback. This year it's been different. I mean, they've largely been healthy. Zach Sinter was obviously banged up that first game, but they had really no issue sliding Chuck Filiaga in there at the other guard spot to fill it. And that goes back to that depth and that experience they have. I was really bullish on this offensive line coming into this year. I thought it could be one of their stronger units. Obviously, we've seen the running backs eclipse that, but I think the running backs have been so successful because of the offensive line. I mean, they're kind of getting whatever they want at the line of scrimmage. They've been able to push opposing defenses, and that's one of the reasons you've seen that success up front. It's a good thing for Michigan. They've given Cade McNamara some time in the pocket too. So it's really between the health, them staying healthy and the continuity, I think that bodes well for Michigan's offense to keep this going.
And you mentioned we have Blake Quorum, just incredible. He's such a threat inside and outside, and you have to love Hassan Haskins, who's just such a workhorse back, never loses yards, always falls forward. And we got to see Donovan Edwards look pretty good Saturday, too.
Yeah, it's really the strength of this offense at this point. I mean, they haven't been afraid to give Hassan and Blake, 20, 25 carries a game. And both of them they've been able to handle it just fine. I mean, Blake's obviously a little bit different runner from Hassan. Hassan's, like you said, that bruiser and get kind of yards after contact, and Blake's more of that elusive back who's trying to avoid tackles and bust those big plays. But they really work well together, and then they haven't really been afraid to use both of them on the field at the same time, doing different things. And I mean, that's clearly been the strength of this Michigan offense. It's been really impressive to watch both of them. I thought maybe Hassan was in for a big year, but it's turned out to be Blake. I mean, he's looked incredible. I mean, he leads the country in all-purpose yards. He's third, I think, in the country in rushing yards per game. They're leaning on him to do a lot, but at the same token, he's been able to handle it all, and I think that's perhaps been the most impressive thing. His name is starting to come up in Heisman Trophy chatter. I know it's really early, but when you look at the numbers and his play on the field, just go back and watch some of the tape. I mean, he's been fantastic through 3 games.
Well, a great concern for most Michigan fans before the season was the defense. Through 3 games, I have to say, I'm sure pleasantly surprised with what we've seen on that side of the ball. Mike McDonald and his staff have these guys playing at a very impressive level, don't they, Aaron?
Yeah, and they've really been changing it up. I mean, that was the key, I think, that, the area where Don Brown, I think, struggled most. I thought they did a fine job in man coverage often, with the pressure on the quarterback, but opposing, it was clear as day, opposing offenses knew how Michigan was going to play them defensively, and they were able to adjust. And that's why you saw Michigan, I think, struggle in some of those big games in the past couple of years. And the difference this year is Mike McDonald was throwing more at opposing offenses. I mean, you heard it, Thomas Hammock, the head coach from Northern Illinois on Saturday, he said that, and Rocky Lombardi was asked the same thing. That was not the same defense they saw last year against Michigan. They're throwing disguises in there. They're not blitzing as much. They're dropping back into zone coverage in the secondary, making it difficult to find some of those holes and beat those receivers down the field. So Michigan's just doing things. They're giving opponents different looks. And when you force opponents to think more and have to adjust more, they're more prone to making mistakes and just not being as efficient. And I think that's why you've seen Michigan, play so well so far. I'm really curious to see how they handle some of these, these bigger, tougher, more potent Big Ten offenses. But like I said earlier, I mean, you're 3 games in, you've played relatively well. They've only forced a couple of turnovers, but they've kept the ball in front of them. They haven't been prone to those big plays that impacted Don Brown's defense so much. So, yeah, for a first-year coordinator, a new scheme with so many guys getting adjusted, it's been a smash success.
Well, from what you've seen of the defense so far, Aaron, and I know it's only a 3-game sample, what has impressed you the most, and what do you still see as areas of concern?
I mean, I think that they've adjusted well, like I said. I mean, these guys have been Mike McDonald's been rotating a lot of guys in and out. I think, to see how they fit and how they react in games. But I think, by and large, you've seen the players, I think, handle it pretty well. A lot has been asked of them. I mean, you look at one guy in particular, Jackson Hill. He's playing more aggressively. He's playing more positions. He's kind of more all over the field than he was with Don Brown. And you're seeing struggles at the same time. And communication errors have popped up. Guys have been, they're not lining up in the right spots. And I think that's obviously going to happen with a new scheme. So I think they've adjusted well. They're playing fast and to the ball. And that's something Mike McDonald's really stressed early in the season. I think the one thing that they can improve on would be, the force more turnovers. It's something when you play more zone and you're not getting as much pressure on the quarterback, you need to force more pick interceptions. They just got their first one on Saturday with Jamon Green, but I think that's the biggest area where they can improve. And Mike McDonald, he was asked about it last week. He said the same thing. I mean, that's been a tenet of their defense. Need to force more turnovers. Whether that comes remains to be seen. But like I said, they've done a good job of keeping the ball in front of them. So far, so good.
Well, Aaron, back over on the offensive side of the ball, what's interesting to me is Jim Harbaugh has put this new young staff together, But the kind of football that we're seeing, especially on offense, is really just basic smash mouth, run the ball, throw to back up a defense kind of philosophy. Most modern defenses recruit and build defenses to play against all of the spread offenses, which is, it seems like, the majority in college football. Almost brilliant to come back with an offense like this, in that defenses know what Michigan is going to do, and they still can't stop it yet.
Yeah, it's really a testament to him. Kind of, he's going against the curve. Everyone's going one way, and he's kind of going the other. But you're right, and I think that goes back to them, Michigan just having a more experienced, brute strength offensive line. You got guys that have been there a while now. They know how Michigan wants to play. They clearly like playing for Schiano more, the new offensive line coach. They've been really energized. And I think when you start seeing success on the ground, too, in the first couple of games, that, I think, gives them more confidence. And I think that's good for the future. And I think that win over Washington, many of us had that as kind of a toss-up game coming into the year. But the way that they were just able to run down Washington and the Huskies not have a response and not be able to stop Michigan, I think was the most impressive part of this first three game schedule. Michigan, I came in as a slight favorite. I mean, they were, expected to be a close game, and at the end of the day, it really wasn't. Michigan handled them just like they did against Western Michigan. So, yeah, their offense has been really impressive. I think that's probably been the most important, impressive part about this first three games. Whether they can continue that into the Big Ten schedule is going to be key. But I've been really impressed with the run game and the offensive line.
Well, we should get more answers this week. Rutgers rolls into the Big House playing very well, and they just might be, the first team that has the personnel to load the box and force Michigan to throw the ball a bit more. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Do you, Aaron?
No, Rutgers, is we always joke about them, but they're playing a lot better. Since Greg Schiano's gotten there. He's another guy that's been able to motivate his team, because they look at themselves as kind of the underdogs and the downtrodden of the Big Ten East. They're the 3-0 coming in. Their first three games have very much been just as lopsided as Michigan's were. They have wins over Temple and Syracuse, no slouches either, and they've got an experienced group back on both sides of the ball. They got senior playmakers, returning quarterback, returning receivers, returning starting running back. They've got some talented guys on the defensive side of the ball. So, yeah, I think this is going to be a bigger test than some folks may think it's going to be. The odds makers pegged it as a 19.5-point game when the line came out Sunday. I think that was a little too high. We saw what Rutgers did last year in Piscataway. I know it was a different season. Michigan had its issues and everything else, but this isn't the same Rutgers team of a few years ago. They're going to come in and play competitive.
No, I agree with you. And those point spreads, that's crazy. 19.5 points. And, I watched Rutgers this weekend, and I didn't see that they were exceptional, at any one thing that impressed me. Coach Schiano, as you mentioned, just a fundamentally strong football coach, and this team just doesn't make mistakes. They look well prepared. They're going to come in here ready to play.
Yeah, he knows what it takes to win. Rutgers was obviously successful with him in the Big East before, and obviously this is a different time and a different conference. But he's done a very good job of recruiting the Northeast. He's getting a lot of those top guys out of the state of New Jersey, players that perhaps a Michigan or a Penn State would have, in previous years would have went in and gotten. So he's clearly got Rutgers heading in the right direction. They were competitive last year, despite his first year. I thought they would take a small leap, this year and probably win a couple more games. That would not surprise me if they finished this year 6-6, 7-5, and get into a bowl game. It is different playing in the Big House compared to Piscataway like they did last year, where Michigan struggled and it took 3 overtimes to get there. Yeah, they're a good team. They have a senior quarterback, as I mentioned, Noah Vedral. He's thrown for over 600 yards in the first 3 games. Isaiah Pacheco, an experienced running back who's played against Michigan before. They've got a top of the line receiver, Mo Melton. So there are pieces there. They're not the caliber of the Westerns or Northern Illinois, the MAC. I think they're a little bit better. They'll probably hang in there for the first half, first 3 quarters. But at this point, I think that's what Michigan needs. I mean, they need better competition to try and test to see where this team is at. I still think the October 2nd game at Wisconsin is going to be a good barometer, really, of where this Michigan football team stands. But Rutgers surely is, I think, a good start for the Big Ten slate.
Well, we all tend to overreact early in the season when you roll off 3 wins and look as good as we have. But the bottom line is we don't know how good this team is. And, when you get to Big Ten play and a team has 3 weeks of tape on you, they start to play you differently. That's just the way it is in football. And that's what makes this game so fascinating to me, Aaron, because while, as we've talked about, Rutgers doesn't have great athletes, they're solid. And we will learn a lot more about this Michigan team on Saturday, won't we?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why, Michigan hasn't thrown the ball as much as they have in the first 3 weeks. I think they're trying to limit what opponents have on tape of them. Cade McNamara's only started 4 games in his collegiate career. I mean, he's still a relatively newcomer to this thing. He hasn't been really put in those big time spots just yet. In fact, his debut, I guess you could say, was last year at Rutgers when they came back to win that game. So, it's going to be an interesting game. I suspect Michigan is probably going to try and throw the ball a little bit more, a tad more. But again, I think they're going to go back to relying on the ground game, the strength of their offense, and winning that way. And I think that goes with the fact that they're trying to not throw the entire playbook out there early in the year when you've got big name opponents like a Wisconsin, like a Penn State, like an Ohio State still on the schedule. But when you look up and down the Big Ten East, I think it's wide open this year. I do think Ohio State's still the front runner. Clearly, I think they have the best players, but you've seen them falter here a little bit early on. Penn State, I think, has looked exceptional so far, but Michigan too. I mean, I think they're there's a pathway there. Maybe not so much for them to win it, but to get their foot in the door there. And for Michigan fans to come out of the end of the tunnel this year and say, okay, that was a good year, better than what we expected, and it gives them momentum for next year.
Well, around the Big Ten, as you mentioned, it was a really interesting weekend. And let me get your take on a few games, starting with that Penn State Saturday night game. It was a crazy atmosphere, whiteout in Happy Valley, and those games are always fun to watch. You had some really bad SEC officiating, I'll have to say that. But Penn State showed me a lot. That is a good football team on both sides of the ball, isn't it?
Yeah. Coming into the year, I kind of had them in Indiana as kind of that fighting for that number 2 spot in the East Division. I think clear at this point, Penn State is that number 2. Perhaps they might be the best team in the Big Ten East. I'm really curious, waiting for that Penn State Ohio State game. I think it's October 31st, Halloween night. So they look good. It was a whiteout. They tend to play very well at night. They're in Pennsylvania. Auburn isn't a very good road team, so I expected Penn State to win that game. They did. They took care of business. I think it just validated the start that they've had. Again, they're another team that returns a lot. They brought back their starting quarterbacks, several guys on the opposite side of the ball. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with, and I think that game against Ohio State in October is really going to determine the trajectory of the Big Ten East. With Michigan as being the underdog. I think they're kind of the outside looking in there, but they're interesting. I moved them into my top 10 ballot this week in the AP poll. I think they're a solid team, but I do want to see more of them. They need to win another big game. They need to show kind of like, they're kind of like James Franklin's kind of in Jim Harbaugh territory where, he tends to win the games they're not supposed to and then lose those bigger games. So we'll see how they fare the rest of the way. But so far, I think this division, Ohio State, Penn State, and then probably Michigan number 3.
Well, I have to tip my hat to Sparty, too, going into Miami, punching the underachieving Hurricanes in the mouth. Mel Tucker has his guys playing physical, good fundamental football, doesn't he, Aaron?
They've been, I think, the biggest surprise of the Big Ten so far, for me at least. I mean, we didn't really know what to expect out of this Michigan State team. I mean, they showed some glimpses last year, still lost a lot of games. Mel Tucker's done a very good job of bringing in, those grad transfers and those transfers to fill holes, and they've done a good job of it. He's got guys playing well. He's got another top back in Kenneth Walker. I mentioned earlier that Blake Corum's 3rd in the country in rushing. Kenneth Walker's number 1. Mm-hmm. So it's, they've got a very potent offense there at Michigan State. I was kind of surprised. It's not easy going down to Miami, playing in that heat and humidity, and beating a Hurricane team, no matter how good or bad they are. So that was an impressive win for Michigan State. But, put them in the top 25. It just makes that Big Ten East race, I think, even more competitive. And looking at the standings and looking across college football, I'd put at this point through 3 games, I'd put the Big Ten East division up against any other division in college football from top to bottom. I mean, even, coming into the year, I think most of us had Rutgers and Maryland at the bottom. Well, they're both 3-0 through non-conference play. I mean, that's not to say it's sustainable. I mean, they're gonna lose their share of games. But top to bottom, you've got some good quality college football teams in this division. It's not going to, whoever wins it, it's certainly not going to be easy.
Well, there seems to be a lot of hand-wringing down in Columbus after last weekend. I'm not sure why. I mean, with all of the talent they have, it just seems like it's a matter of time before they put it together. But so far, they've looked very beatable, haven't they?
Yeah, shaky defensively, and that was probably, they obviously made that run last year, and they were had a very good football program. But when you went back and looked at the statistics, Ohio State's secondary was the dead last in the Big Ten, even worse than Michigan. So they've shown cracks. They're prone to giving up big plays, and you're starting to see, I think, opposing teams attack that. So I don't think Ohio State, as I said earlier, that necessarily that runaway favorite to win the Big Ten East now, or to win the Big Ten this year. I think you've got more competition. They're going to be in some games this year. I wouldn't surprise me if they lose another one, whether that's the Penn State or maybe perhaps Michigan finally pulls the upset this year. But they've got some things to figure out. They utilized they had a different play caller on defense last week. But at the end of the day, I still have them as my the top team in the Big Ten, just from a talent perspective, playmaking perspective. They got so many weapons on offense. They do still have some very good players defensively. I'm really curious to see if they can figure it out and get some momentum going. But yeah, through 3 weeks, I mean, if you're an Ohio State fan, you're worried a little bit. And that's not to say they're not going to win the Big Ten. Like I said, I still think they probably will, but it's not that clear. There's not that gap that we've seen here in the last couple of years in the Big Ten.
No, there really isn't. Well, final question before we let you get away, Aaron. Michigan fans are, as we know, hungry for this team to be competitive with the big boys in the East. And the first 3 games have, kind of fueled that fire. If Michigan can take care of business on Saturday against Rutgers, in my mind, the trip to Madison next week is when we really start getting answers, some very real answers. Do you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's going to be the barometer of how good this team really is. Because they've struggled there. I mean, they've lost 5 straight in Madison. Mm-hmm. They haven't won the 2 games under Jim Harbaugh. Their last win there, I think, was 2001. It's just a place where they go to essentially die. I mean, they never play well there. They always, the last few games they lost by double digits. They're usually they struggle offensively. That is going to, I think, help determine the trajectory of the season. Because if they can go in there and pull an upset and win that game, because I fully suspect they'll be the underdog going in, whatever happens with Wisconsin this week. If they can come in and play well and win that game, I think you're going to start hearing some folks. The chatter will be real. I think you'll start hearing some folks throw them in the Big Ten title contention. I think they'll feel good about themselves, and it'll be, I think, that win that I think so many of the Michigan fans have been clamoring for, where that game where Michigan goes on the road and wins the game it's not expected to. And then it would give them, they would probably move to 5-0, and then you never know from there. But yeah, it's going to really help determine, I think, the trajectory of this season. Because as I mentioned earlier, I mean, they started 4-0 in 2017, then the bottom fell out. And if they lose that game at Wisconsin in 2 weeks, who knows where they go from there.
No, absolutely. And I haven't seen a kick time. I don't think it's even been established for that Wisconsin game. Is there a chance maybe that one would be at night?
It's possible. I mean, it seems like the last few times they've gone there, they've been noon games, but I don't know which network has the decision on that. I don't know which game or network it's on, but it's very possible. I mean, given the fact that likely going in, both teams are probably ranked in the top 15. Michigan would probably be unbeaten, and those TV networks love a highly successful, Michigan and Jim Harbaugh program to talk about.
First things first, take care of Rutgers on Saturday to set that up, so we shall see. Here with us on our Michigan Game Day segment this week has been Michigan beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Aaron, always a pleasure, and we look forward to getting you back soon.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Mike.
On Quick Hits today, at Jim's presser Monday, he did not have any injury updates. He was happy with the energy and execution on both sides of the ball and said Cade is doing a great job running the offense. He said the guys are having fun and playing hard. That was pretty much the theme of his 30-minute press conference. The kickoff time for the Wisconsin game was announced on Monday. It will be 12 noon up in Madison. I was thinking it might be a 3:30 start or even a night game, but the decision was made to kick it at high noon instead. This Saturday's game is a 3:30 p.m. kick. Rutgers comes in at 3-0, and they have been very impressive so far. Coach Greg Schiano might not have the talent he needs to contend yet, but his team is well coached and has not made many mistakes. They have 0 turnovers on offense, have created numerous turnovers on defense, and have been flagged very few times. They won't beat themselves, it appears. On Thursday's Visitors Edition, we'll get the inside scoop from Rutgers beat writer James Cratch from the Newark Star-Ledger and NewJersey.com, so make sure you join us. That will do it for now. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!